So hello everybody, Shalom,
Shalom.
and welcome to the second session of our Mussar class. Let's start as we usually do with our blessing, and there it is. Say together, Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu Melech HaOlam Asher Kidshanu Mitzvotav V'tzivanu La'asok B'divrei Torah. Blessed are you, Adonai, our God, ruler of the world, who sanctified us with his commandments and has commanded us to engage in words of Torah. Okay, let's see. I'm realizing that I need to put those who are on the phone on the speaker. So Dave and Joyce, can you hear okay?
It would be nice if it were louder, but I know I have trouble hearing.
Yeah.
Okay,
Hi,
great.
how are you?
Great.
Good.
Okay, very good. So today's topic is the character trait or midah of humility, anava in Hebrew. But before we dive into that, I'd like to just take a minute or two and just sort of remind ourselves of what we talked about in the first session. Three basic principles, I think, sort of encapsulize what we discussed. The first thing is that in our essence, we are souls, and the mission of our souls in this life is to be holy by separating ourselves from unworthy behavior and metaphorically sort of letting the light of our souls shine through to others. And so this whole activity of Mussar that we're engaged in is directing at elevating our soul consciousness so that we can do this. The second general principle is that we live in a constant struggle between two inclinations, one to be holy and one not to be. This is how God created us, or if you prefer, you could say this is human nature. And as it says in Genesis, sin crouches at the door, but we can be its master. So that's our objective, is to try and be the master of those things that are making us not want to live up to our spiritual and other potential. We want to basically live with greater intentionality and more in concert with our values. And then the third thing is that much of what we do is driven by our unconscious or our subconscious, and the ideas of Mussar develop greater intentionality so that we can really react to things with more understanding and more what we want to do. And then finally, we do all these things not just by studying like we're doing today, but by learning practical techniques that have been proven over the centuries to seep down into the subconscious level where these things are controlling us. These are things like journaling and meditation and repeating phrases and so on. So that's a quick summary. Of course, the whole session is on my website now, or accessible at rabbiartlevine.com. You can click on the video links and watch the whole session from 2 weeks ago. Any questions or comments about Mussar in general or what we're trying to accomplish? No? Okay, great. Okay, so the assignment from last time was to read the short chapter in Alan Marinis's book, Everyday Holiness, which is the first few chapters are actually accessible online. And the chapter that we're talking about today is humility. Now, I thought, because humility has this connotation in English, I mean, what does it mean to be humble? What does that mean? You know, before you read the chapter, if you read the chapter, what did you think being humble meant? Or Dave and Joyce, I don't know if you read it, but
I just started on the book and did not go to. I'm still kind of in the introduction. Them explaining what Mussar is.
Okay, good. Now, by the way, your voice, by having on the speakerphone on the cell phone, rather than using an external mic, because if I used that, you wouldn't be able to hear very well, and we couldn't tell if you were talking. So I'm going to repeat a little bit about what you say, so that for the benefit of the.
It was totally clear.
You think so?
Oh yeah,
You think
definitely.
you think the video
Yeah.
picked that up?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, you're
All right.
deaf. No,
Great.
definitely. She has a good voice.
Okay, great. So, all right, then you're a good one to pick on, Joyce, since you didn't read the chapter. What's humility?
I think I would have to say almost the opposite of being a braggart.
Well, I would say it's putting yourself in the appropriate place relative to those around you, not trying to be more than you actually are.
Wow, he's good.
Uh-huh.
Wow, he is good. Oh my God.
That is excellent.
Yeah.
Well, what do you mean? It doesn't humble mean being I mean, let me read. I will
Meek?
read. Let me read. I have the American Heritage Dictionary.
I had to look it up.
Is that right?
Because humility came up in my trip to Israel a lot. That I mean, and I looked it up, and not all the dictionary really says, or at least my dictionary, is not arrogant, or the opposite of
Okay.
arrogance.
Okay, so I looked up humility. It says the quality or condition of being humble, lack of pride or modesty. So that's somewhat helpful. So then I looked up, well, what is it? If it's the quality of being humble, so what does humble mean? Humble is having or showing feelings of humility rather than of pride, aware of one's shortcomings, modest, meek. And then there are synonyms.
Okay, that's not what mine.
Meek, lowly,
That's
modest,
arrogant.
self-conscious,
That's
retiring.
Opposite of arrogant.
Okay, so Dave, in the dictionary I don't get anything in here
I
about
think
being in your place. Sounds like you're supposed to be meek and modest.
How do they deal with this in Israel? And this is
Dave, do you want to respond to that?
hypothetical of what they.
Hold on, David.
No, because in my mind,
He's
that's
really
what
good.
I thought I was saying.
Okay,
Not trying above where you actually are.
okay.
I suppose that when I think about what I said, I see where you're coming from in that at some point in time, your place would be such that it would be inaccurate to be modest.
Okay.
Because you might be the expert in the room, for instance.
All right. So,
Wouldn't want to be arrogant, but no, I think even if you were the expert in the room, you could be humble. You can be humble. You can deliver yourself in a humble way.
That's right.
And I think you do that, Rabbi.
I don't think you
In
need
your-
this class, Dave.
well, thank you, Joyce. So, Dave, you're not backing down. I mean, I read you you're telling me that the American Heritage Dictionary is wrong and you're right?
No, I'm telling you that how
Yes.
I feel. You asked what it was to me. You didn't ask me what it was in the American Heritage Dictionary.
Yay.
Okay. Well,
Right
we'll
now.
see. I'm just pushing back a little because we're going to test your theory of your definition here.
Okay.
So,
You don't have a lot of courtroom experience. I can see that.
not as much as I would like, actually. But most of my courtroom experience is being an expert witness, and when I have been challenged in cross-examination. But anyway, okay. So my next question is: who is the paragon of humility in Judaism, if we have one?
Moses. I don't know.
Okay, that's right. Great. And how do we know that Moses is the paragon of humility?
Well, it says here,
Oh, does it? I didn't read it.
if a leader as great as Moses was so humble, there is surely more to humility than the shrinking meekness we ordinarily associate with the term.
Okay, you're reading from
Which
Marinus'
page?
book on
Page
page
47.
Okay, but how do we know, without reading his book, that you're okay, Richard? You're tapping on something there.
In the Tanakh.
You're tapping on the Tanakh. Okay, so it actually says
We've been told.
it says. Well, I'm going to read it to you in Numbers, verse 12:3. It says, "V'ha'ish Moshe anav me'od mikol ha'adam asher al pnei ha'adamah." So the man, there you go. That's it. Any questions? So the man Moses was very humble, more than any other man on the face of the earth. So there you go. This we know, and interestingly enough, of all the things that the Torah tells us about Moses, this is the only explicit virtue that is mentioned for him. I mean, let's think about some of the things that Moses did, and I'm encouraging you. What I like to do when I think about Moses is think about Charlton Heston in the Ten Commandments.
He broke them.
Oh, that's
Well, that's okay. He broke them. That's right. So what are some of the things that Moses did? Think of his life in the Tanakh. I mean, what are some of his major? What actions did he take?
He left his family and went off on an adventure to a new place unknown because he was asked to. That was very brave.
He
Okay.
killed the task guy.
Killed a taskmaster.
He stood up to Pharaoh.
Stood up to God.
Stood up to
Yeah,
God.
that's true,
Stood
you're
up to
right.
Pharaoh. Said repeatedly.
Right.
Yes, he did. You know, God was going to destroy the Israelites, and so on several occasions, Moses says, "You don't want to do that."
Right.
Right.
And he was just an ordinary bloke. I mean, he wasn't a Carlton Heston.
He was what we make him.
Well,
Why do you think it's
he
in
I mean,
the
you say he's
palace?
older,
You look
but
at
he
the
grew up
vision.
as a prince
Right.
in the palace.
Right.
I mean, what greater opportunity to develop arrogance is that you're the son of the pharaoh. You're the royal palace brat. Right? Okay. And then Richard, as you said, he just got the tablets from God. He smashes them. He leads the people for 40 years in the desert. He's the judge. He tells them, here's what God wants you to do. He makes rulings. He's like the super George Washington, the founder of our nation. And yet this is the guy who is the most humble person on the face of the earth who did all these things. So it doesn't add up if you use the dictionary definition. It only works if we use Dave's definition.
Our new
So there's something in Jewishly, and we know because we've read the chapter, but Jewishly, being humble does not mean being meek or modest, necessarily. It means doing what's appropriate under the circumstances, just like Dave told us. Is there, now I want to ask kind of a related question. Is there any indication in Torah that Moses actually lacked self-esteem? Do we remember any case where he didn't step forward, let's say, to do something? And I'm not suggesting that there was. I'm just saying, can we think of any
When he broke the
instance? Well, I mean that he. So now he lacked. You think that was an example of him lacking
He
self-esteem?
left.
How so?
Well, he didn't believe they were what they are.
Oh,
How would that be showing a lack of self-esteem?
I guess he thought less of himself than he thought. No.
Did he think he was unworthy to bring them to the people? Is that why he broke them?
No, he broke them because had he delivered them to the people, they would have accepted them, and it would have done wrong, and so therefore he broke them so that they would not be breaching the covenant.
Oh, so you mean he broke them It's interesting. So he literally broke the covenant so that they wouldn't figuratively break it, you might say. I haven't ever heard that
Little faith in his
interpretation.
people.
That's interesting. That could be. That's interesting. He might not have had. But I mean, I think the text. Oh, sorry, right, Barbara. Go
I
ahead.
thought he broke them because he was mad at the people.
Well,
That's what I thought.
Yeah, that's what the
Because
text
the way
certainly
they were
says.
acting.
Right. He comes
So
down.
he got so mad, he said, "Screw you!"
Yeah, he was
excuse
angry.
me. He got mad and he put it right.
Right, they didn't believe it.
Well, as a matter of fact, God says, I hear the people. You better get down there. And he goes down there, and then he.
Right. They have the golden calf, right?
Sorry, Joyce. Did you want to say something?
No, David's going to make a point.
Okay.
No, I stated, or it didn't come through the way I had he given them the tablets while this was going on, then they would be in the process of breaking the covenant. And so he broke, in my view, he broke the tablets so that they would not be breaking the covenant.
I see.
Yeah, no, that's really interesting.
But they didn't know about the covenant until the tablets came down.
But he knew. He knew.
He knew
They were
they were
breaking.
breaking them. Right.
Okay, that's a very interesting theory, David, and you might be right. I only tell you, I've never heard that interpretation before.
No.
It's an interesting one. But where I'm really going with this question is why wasn't Moses arrogant? I mean, given all he did, his leadership and the fact that he got the tablets to bring the people and he brought them out of Egypt, or with God's help.
He had
But
good self-esteem.
so why wasn't he arrogant? Why was he the most? How could he be the most humble person given all that he had done?
If he was, I don't think the Bible would have the same power. I don't think we would respect what happened in his choices and decisions as much. I think it was deliberate on the part of the writers that he not be.
Well, his standard was God, so therefore it would be natural that he would be humble.
Could you explain that a little bit more, please, Dave?
Because all the things he did, while they were great and so on, they could not match God. I mean, God was his standard. He obviously sees himself coming below that. So it seems that there would be a natural humility there.
Okay, so what you have, Dave, you have hit the nail on the head there, and the moral or the lesson we get from this is that we tend to judge ourselves based on others, and if we feel that we've done better than those around us, we tend to be more arrogant.
Or humble.
Well, or maybe humble. That's true. But the rabbis say that Moses was the person who was closest to God than anybody ever was. He had a personal relationship. He talked to God. So on and so on. And because, as you say, he saw some evidence or many factors showing how wonderful God, how strong, powerful God was. This is how he judged himself in comparison. And therefore, because he was the one who closest to God, he was the most humble because he was the least in comparison to who he was judging himself with. So I agree with your point.
What does this have to do with Mussar?
This has to do with Mussar because we're talking about how one can cultivate the trait of being humble. And one of the things that we often do in not being humble is to think that we are better than those around us. And so we're looking at Moses as a paradigm of who he was looking at. And the corollary of that is that whenever we think about how good we are or how much we've accomplished, if we only compare ourselves to others and not think about our capabilities, then we're more apt to be arrogant. So if one says, I may have done a lot, but considering what the capabilities that God gave me, I haven't really done anything. I'm way below what I should have done, regardless of what I actually have done.
Doesn't all this have to do with self-esteem?
Isn't it also that God looks at us and he says, I don't expect you to be as good as Moses, but I expect you to be that you can be.
Right.
Right.
That's right. That's the Talmud says when we appear before the judge, we won't be asked why weren't you as good as somebody else, but we'll be asked why weren't you all that you could have been. You know, God gave you these capabilities. What did you do with them? And I should explain, Dave. By the way, this is the first time that we're using this technology. So the speaker phone apparently on my iPhone is voice activated. So unless I'm silent for a moment and give you a chance to speak, then you won't be heard.
Okay.
So so I'll try to leave a few spaces so you can jump in. Now, Richard, you asked about self-esteem. What did you want to say about that?
I guess my perception of humility is directly related to level of self-esteem.
And what do you mean?
So that if you have high self-esteem, you can more easily be more humble, or have a large amount of humility.
Did you say that again? If you have more self-esteem?
Yeah, the more self-esteem you have, the easier it is to be humble.
And why is that?
Then you're comfortable with who you are and where you are within God's world.
I don't know that the two are that closely related.
I think they're extremely closely related. Well, to me anyway.
Dave?
If I understand what he said correctly, I agree, because I think that if one has a good picture of themselves, they have no reason to then try to show that they are more than that, so that they can easily allow themselves to be humble when it is certainly appropriate for them to be humble.
So, as a matter of fact, one of the books that I read preparing for today was Joseph Telushkin's "You Shall Be Holy." He has a chapter on humility. He tells many stories that are right in line with this idea, and one that I'm remembering right now is he talks about a renowned psychiatrist, who wrote a book on depression. He was the leading authority on depression, and a rabbi who ultimately became a psychiatrist was in his first year of medical training. And somebody called this rabbi and asked what he thought a proper medication would be. And the rabbi said, I'm only in my first year, I don't know. And apparently the story got to the writer of the book, who was a professor at the medical school, and he calls this rabbi and says, what do you think? And the rabbi said, well, I'm only a first-year student. Why are you asking me? You know the treatment's much better than I do. I only know what I'm learning from your book. And the author of the book said, well, you know the patient much better, so together we can figure this out. So later on, the rabbi was telling this story about how the professor and the writer of the book considered the opinion of the first-year resident, and the other person with whom he was speaking said, he's the only one who had the strongest self-esteem.
They both did.
Well, I said he didn't have to worry. He had no problem asking a first-year student his
Right.
opinion
Right.
because the answer was no way was going to affect his self-esteem. He wrote the book. He was a recognized authority. There was no problem in him asking anyone what their opinion was. No one was going to think the lesser of him for it. So I think that's just what you're saying. So, and of course, we have in Pirkei Avot, Ethics of the Fathers, the idea who is wise, he who learns from anyone. And we could say who's humble, who's willing to learn from anyone. Same sort of idea.
And one who is not depressed, I guess, is also another
Okay,
partial
could have
part
some.
of this.
Right. Okay, Dave, you trying to interject?
No.
Oh, okay. All right. Okay. So, all right. So now I'd like to ask, in this book that we are using as our guide, this Everyday Holiness. If you looked at it, you see that there are 13 different traits. And the first one is humility. And so my question is, why would he start with humility?
I think that being humble is very important to being a good Jew. I think if you're not humble, you're not going to be able to be the kind of Jew that the Torah wants you to be.
And why is it that if you're not humble, you
You
couldn't
don't
be?
stop with the whys, do you?
Why do you ask? Why I don't stop at the whys? Well, I'm just trying to, flesh it out a little bit. I have the advantage of having prepared this, so it doesn't mean that I know any more. I just am prepared.
Because we can't assume that we're a finished product. We always want to be better. Number one, we always want to be better, so we always want to be learning and improving. Number one,
It also provides openness to be
new
better.
ideas.
Okay, could you expand on that?
If we're comfortable with who we are and where we are in this world, we have more of the ability to be open to change and to learn and to give and to take or whatever. If you're uncomfortable, you have other things pressing on you that are more important than being the best we can be.
Okay, right. I'm just hesitating, so you can participate if you want, Dave and Joyce.
Well, I was just going to say almost exactly the same thing. There are 13 other principles that we're going to cover, or 12 other principles that we're going to cover, and if we don't go into that with a degree of humility, how can we possibly learn? We must humble ourselves to a degree in order to be open enough to be able to assume that there is something that we can be taught.
Okay, great. And what Alan Marinas says more specifically, right in line with what you're saying, is that if we assume, like we said at the beginning, that we are motivated or our actions are driven by things of which we're not necessarily aware, unless we are open enough to accept the possibility that we may need to change or that there may be things that we're not aware of that are driving our behavior, then we can't change our behavior. So without that openness, the rest is futile. If you're not willing to listen to somebody if you're not willing to find out what's actually motivating you, then you can't expect to be able to change. So that's the ability to be self-critical is only possible through humility. Great. Okay, so you said, Dave, earlier on that you thought that being humble had to do with, it could vary according to the circumstances. Could you elaborate a little on that, please? You don't have to, but...
Those really weren't good words, if that's how I put it, because that implies that there are times when it's perfectly okay not to be humble,
Well, I'm not so sure you did. I'm going to challenge you on that because, of course, it assumes we're kind of using the definition.
Yeah, it depends how we use the definition.
Right.
Which
Right.
part of the definition we
Right,
use.
right. So there's a famous story which was related in this chapter, and I may even have mentioned it 2 weeks ago. But it's the rabbis talk about the temple, the second temple, being destroyed because of excessive humility. Do you remember that story?
No.
Okay, so basically, the broad outline is that there was a man named Bar Kamsa
Yes.
who was felt that he had been slighted
Right.
by a group of
Right.
rabbis. And I won't say why at the moment, but he got the idea of having getting the Romans believe that there was a revolt by he told the Romans that the Jews were going to offer a sacrifice with a defect.
Right.
And he's the one who made the defect. And unbeknownst to him, the Jews found out about his plot. And they went to the head rabbi and they explained, and they said, well, we need to go ahead and sacrifice this animal even though there's a defect. And the rabbi said, well, we can't do that because people will think it's okay to sacrifice an animal with a defect. So they said, well, then we need to kill him. And he said, well, we can't do that because people will think you'll die if you submit a sacrifice with a defect. So instead they rejected the defect. They rejected the animal, just like Bar Kamsa had told the Romans they would. They then believed that the Jews were in revolt, and they came in and destroyed the temple. This is the story. And so the rabbi said it was because the rabbi, was too timid in exercising his authority when strong action was needed, that the temple was destroyed. So he did not, and then the way this is put by Marinus, he did not occupy his rightful space. He needed to exercise the full extent of his authority. By not doing so, he was not exercising the Jewish concept of humility. Or you could say he was too humble. That we're kind of confusing terms here. So this is very much about, the Jewish idea of humility is very much about occupying the proper space under the circumstances. Another example, I can't remember whether it's in Marin's book or in Telushkin's book, is that when you have a police officer directing traffic, you expect the police officer to take control and tell everybody what to do, and that's what they're supposed to do. On the other hand, that evening, if the police officer goes to a back to school night, you expect him to act like anybody else,
Right.
not being. Okay.
That was in here.
Right. Okay. So that was in this
That's
book.
right.
All right. So and then one of the other examples that is also in there that I like is when you go to the park and you sit down on a bench. Where do you sit on the bench?
You take up the whole space.
Do you sit in the middle and spread your arms out, and no matter who comes by, you stay there?
Oh, I've
That's
seen people
excessive
do that.
space.
Or in the theater.
Right, or do you sit down on the
sits
very
at the end
edge
and
and,
doesn't move to the middle so
Right.
people can't get in.
So it's all about understanding how much space in a particular situation you should exercise, and that's what humility means.
Right.
Not always being meek or modest or retiring or quiet. And it's figuring out this balance. That's the key. So what? I'll stop for a moment so you can jump in if you want to, Dave and Joyce.
No, we're good.
Okay. So
Scared them
what
off.
are some? What do you think some examples might be in our everyday life of? We just cited some from the book, but in our as we go along and do our things day to day. What challenges do we have of filling the right space?
Well, it's a challenge being with other people who act differently and don't allow you to be humble, have this humility. So it's not just you're living within a world, you're not living in isolation.
So are you thinking of any specific circumstance?
There's many different circumstances, but it's how other people, what other people allow you to do or don't allow you to do and expect of you, or some people are not humble, and for you to be the best you can be, you would act differently than if you were working with or interacting with people who are more humble than that.
Interesting. So you're actually varying your reactions based on how other people are treating you.
Yeah, based on the environment.
It's definitely an issue with dealing with children, an adult versus a child, an adult versus a challenged person of any kind, or even where the walks of life aren't the same. Even the way you deal with a waiter or a waitress, or anybody that's serving you. I think that really brings out your character and your humility.
What is it about how you are treating, reacting to? Let's talk about a waiter or a waitress. Why should we care what they think?
Because they're people.
Oh, not what they think,
But how right?
Or how they feel?
Right.
Because they're a person.
Okay. And therefore what?
And we should be concerned about how we treat other people, regardless of what their station, in quotes, life is.
Why?
You have to treat people respectfully.
Why?
Because it's the right thing to do.
Do we get that from any Jewish source?
Probably, but I don't
That's
know
what
that
it was,
exactly what it
aiming
is.
towards.
Okay, so I mean, you're right, of course. Especially since you're my wife, by definition, you're right.
Thank you. I
But,
remember that next time.
Infrequently, but
Yeah, it's really. I'm going to quote that. Can I quote you on that constantly?
you won't.
Yeah.
And I
Yes,
have my
you will.
witnesses
I
right
think
here.
the really interesting thing is when our children get to a point where they think they're smarter than we are. That's a really interesting change in life.
So
Well,
the
they are smarter than we are. So.
But then they would go back and know you're smarter than they are.
so I don't want to miss the Jewish sources from this idea that everyone is created in the image of God. Got that in B'Tselem Elohim. Got that from Genesis. And the implication of that is that we're all of equal value. And the implication of that, for example, you may have heard the expression from Talmud, or the question, is your blood redder? That comes from the story of somebody who, a leader, I think is a mayor or leader of a town, who the Romans are usually the villains in these stories. And because, of course, they were at the time of the writing of the Talmud. So apparently somebody, a leader of the village, was told by the Romans, you must give up X innocent person, or they didn't think he was innocent, but he knew it to be innocent, or we will kill you. So the leader went to the rabbi and said, what do I do? Can I save myself? And the answer was, what makes you think your blood is redder? So if we can't even treat somebody else unfairly to save our own lives, then in every other lesser stakes situation, we can't do that either. So, and there are innumerable examples of this. When you're driving and you're in a hurry, you can't, or we're not allowed to assume that our being in a hurry is a more important purpose than somebody else being in a hurry. Or when you can't cut in line. Unless, of course, if you want to save a life, then that's different. But we can't change the course of a conversation to ourselves.
That was really interesting. Oh, that really caught my attention.
What's that?
In the book where pretty sure it was in here, where they said, when you're having a conversation with someone, do you listen to what they have to say, or are you too busy thinking of something in your experience that you want to reply to that? That really caught my attention.
This is actually a really important thing that is taught in listening with compassion type classes. Are you being there with being fully present for the person who is speaking, not formulating your response, not thinking how you're going to defend yourself, but actually listening, just listening to the person. And then there's a whole mechanism that, at least as I learned it, is called tracking, where you sort of repeat the substance of what you understand the person to say. And once they believe they're heard, then they can respond and go on to the next thing. And if you keep doing that, I mean, in a not obvious way, but still, eventually it will allow the person actually to think through and say things in a deeper way, and certainly to get beyond an emotional level. This is especially important when people are speaking out of strong emotions. Mm-hmm. They will keep doing so until they feel that they have been heard. Then finally at that point they can decompress and slow down, and sometimes then they can say what's really on their mind because they're getting past the emotion. But this is a technique of sensitive listening. But you're right. Not changing the subject to yourself, not saying, "Oh, well, that happened to me," or I know of a situation where, because you may be depriving the other person of what they need as the speaker. How about not assuming that your view is the correct one? That's an example of being open to the possibility of other views. I think I read this in the Telushin book that they say, that Hillel and the house of Hillel and the house of Shammai, two famous rabbis, often had different views, and Shammai was usually took the stricter view, and so the rabbis say that Hillel's view came to be deemed the halakha because it was more tolerant. That's the things I've heard before. What I read the last time I read this was that his school was more humble. They started by reading Shammai's holdings, and then sometimes they would change their views because of that. And it was for that reason, because they were more tolerant and open and willing to concede the correctness of the other's views, that their opinions came to be more respected. So how about honoring other people? One of the things that the dean of my rabbinical school would do, sometimes it seemed to me and others who were listening to an excessive standpoint, because he went on a long time, he would make a point of honoring almost everybody in the room.
Why?
Such and such a person, why? Because he wanted to honor them, and also because he wanted them to feel appreciated. And I don't think this was his motivation, but we also have a concept in Pirkei Avot that who is truly honored? One who honors others.
Can I ask you, does that apply to soccer trophies too? Everyone on the team, the loser team, gets a soccer trophy, so they're not, feel badly that they're not the winning team. The same thing. You honor everyone in the room. To me, that's
it. Okay, so what do you think? What do you think? Is that dishonoring the winners by honoring the losers equally?
Well, I just think it's kind of.
Maybe it is.
I mean, you have a winner and a what can I tell you? Winner, competitive type, winner and the loser. But I mean, everybody, not to hurt the kids whose team came in last place. We're going to give everybody a trophy. You didn't earn the trophy, and life is not like that.
But I don't know if they're equal situations. I totally agree with you. Bethany is teaching elementary school, and I went in to observe her class, and one of the comments I made to her was, "You're handing out prizes for everything. Their prizes aren't going to be worth anything.
Right.
The kids should intrinsically be thrilled with giving the right answer, but that's not the same as giving everybody a voice or feeling that everybody's opinion is worth something."
But the opinion, yes, but you're saying he honors everybody who was in the room?
No, I mean,
That's what I-
the,
that's
all,
what I mean,
the,
so that's
not
really
everyone in the
excessive.
room,
Okay.
but often all the
95%.
whoever the faculty who were in the room, the staff who was in
But
the
how do you
room.
don't you think? I don't know.
Well, I would
if
say it was
understand-
inspiring. I mean, I felt that I was impatient, but it was also inspiring. Now, on the subject of my impatience, which is our topic for not my impatience
Your?
really,
You?
but patience is the next trait we'll be reviewing.
There's
So.
not much there.
There's not much. That's right. Well, I made a
You wrote a code?
modest effort. So,
Uh-huh.
last time I suggested that we, in the end of the evening, before we go to sleep, we write down little things that we experienced during the day that
Okay.
where this humility trait came up in our lives. So, as Richard's pointed out, my list is woefully inadequate. I don't see your list.
Well,
though.
at least you have a list. I was going to say I don't
That's
have
right.
a list either.
So.
I don't think I understood to do that, sorry.
Was that Jennifer? She wants to know if the baby's up.
Okay, well,
Oh,
I
damn.
can't. We can't.
Well, here, could
Call her
we?
on the house
Could
phone.
I hold
Barbara,
call
could you-
and answer?
No, could you
Yeah.
call her on the house phone, please?
I can't. I don't know her number, and I can't look up her number because it's over there.
Okay, well,
Oh.
she'll have to. Okay, sorry. All right, so here are a couple of things that I noticed. About since 2 weeks ago. Did I tell you about the sign at the CVS situation?
I don't
Okay.
remember that.
Yes.
I think maybe I mentioned this to Dave after the session, but
Yeah.
they go ahead, Dave. You want to tell the story if you remember it?
I remember, no.
Okay.
They're discussing it, very frankly, I don't remember that to the detail
Okay.
to this point.
You read a sign, you thought a word was misspelled,
That's right.
and
That's right.
when you really looked and read the sentence, it was not misspelled at all. But your that it was incorrect.
That's absolutely right. Yes, very good memory, Joyce. So I'm honored that you remembered my little story. But yeah, I saw a sign over an aisle, and it said trial. There's a travel and trial, and I thought to myself, that should be travel and trail. Can't believe they put that misspelling up there in plastic. You know, people are so careless. And then I pointed it out to my wife. She said, "Oh, that's where the sample trials are."
Yeah.
And of course, she was right. And then I thought to myself, that's number one on my list. Let's see. How about some of these are personal, so I'm not going to share them. But I talked to an attorney recently about an idea that I have. He's going to help me explore it, and it's a technical issue in my field, and he's not in that field. So, but it's in an area that other people are familiar with. I mean, in general. Maybe be easier if I give you an example. I have an idea that has to do with the employee leasing area. And I explained to him, and he says, "Oh, you mean it's like a small employer for temporary, like if I need a secretary for a couple of days?" And I said, "No, that's not right." And then a minute later, I gave another example, and he said, "Oh, so it's a small business." And then he said another example, and I said, "No, it's not a small business. I'm talking about larger businesses." And then another minute later, he said it a third time. And so I got angry, and I said, "Look, you're not listening to me. It's not a small business. It's a big business." But then I realized later that I was talking about a field that he wasn't familiar with, and I was impatient. I'm jumping to the next topic, but I was not being sufficiently appreciative of the fact that I was dealing in a technical area and he wasn't grasping my concept fast enough. Now, where this comes to play generally is the idea of, if you need to check, of the golden rule, right? We would not want somebody else to be impatient with us because we didn't grasp an idea instantly, or even not instantly. So I recognized that was a problem for me. Another example is we have Torah study every week, And just this morning, the leader of the Torah study asked me a question, and I didn't know the answer. But instead of saying, I'm sorry, I don't know the answer, I didn't say anything. Because I didn't want to be embarrassed in front of the group of saying, I'm sorry, I don't know. So I suppose it should have been something I knew, or the group would have expected me to know it. And so that was a lapse of humility on my part.
From that point, just on that point, when I used to work in a somewhat technical field, I found that I could only admit my ignorance that's where ego does go hand in hand. It was only after I had a couple of years experience and a better feeling about myself in the field that I could admit when I didn't know something. And they said, I don't know the answer to that, but I'm going to find it out and get back to you. The beginning, I couldn't do it as easily.
Here's another example. Now this is more of a difficult one. So as you know from getting my emails and so on, I recently started a website, and I invited people to sign up. This was like a month ago. And I said, I'm going to stop sending you all the automatic weekly Divrei Torah that I've been sending. Whether you asked for them or not, I sent them. But I said, I'm going to stop doing that, and you're not going to get them anymore unless you sign up. Okay, so a few people signed up, but not as many as I would have hoped. So then I'm dealing with the issue of, well, now I'm studying humility. Should I remind them and ask them to sign up again, or should I just let it go? I told them, they didn't do it, but people don't always respond to their email right away. They might have forgotten, they were busy. So I tried to wrestle with what the proper space was for me. Should I send them a reminder or not send them a reminder?
Why are you so impatient?
Why was I so impatient? Why can't you wait until 2 weeks to talk about patience? Well, I'm sure part of it was my ego. I mean, I did this, and I want my brilliant Torah commentary to be heard. But I eventually decided, and I don't know whether it was right or wrong, that because it came to Torah study or Torah teaching, that I should be more assertive than if I was doing something else. And so I sent the reminders, and quite a few people have signed up. So I'm happy, and I hope I did the right thing. But I really did try to think about the balance. How successful I was in just keeping it to the benefit of Torah study versus my own desire for that people sign up, I don't know. But at least I tried to balance that, whereas before I might not have stopped to consider the issue and whether it was something that warranted my being more assertive or not. Does anybody want to share anything that came up for them in the last 2 weeks that touched on, either at the time or now realized, touched on humility?
I can't remember what it was. Yeah.
Okay. No, I don't hear anybody jumping forward. So, I'm sorry, Joyce, did you want to say something?
No, I just mentioned to Dave, something happened to me, and I came home and told Dave about it, and I said, boy, going to your class really made me stop and think how arrogant I was in my thought process, or how impatient I was. But no, I can't remember what it is.
Oh.
Well, I can remember because I didn't understand the assignment, so I didn't write it down. But I had this thing with the phone. It really resonated with me because I was on the phone with a friend of mine this week, and she was telling me about an upsetting experience that happened to her, and I listened and listened and listened. But then when she was done, I relayed an experience that actually didn't happen to me, but happened to someone else that totally related. But this book made me stop to think, well, should I even have done that? Was that proper? It really got me to think how I respond to people's confidences.
Interesting.
Open the mouth.
Like, was that comforting to her or wasn't it? I'm not sure.
As long as you did it because you thought it would be comforting, that's what's important.
Well, that's great, though, that reading the material made you think. I have one other example that I made a note of, I'll share with you. So last Sunday, I went to the pool. We belong to a gym, and there's a pool. And I went in, and it has 3 lanes. 2 lanes were occupied. 1 was vacant. And I needed to get a drink of water or something. So I took my shirt and I put it at the end of the lane to claim the lane. Okay? I was only gone for 10 seconds or 15 seconds, if that. But when I got back, another man was getting into my lane, and my shirt was right there. Couldn't he see that it was my lane? So he gets in and he sort of walks, and then I see he's not even swimming. Then I was really annoyed. He's just, he's walking down the lane. I'm going to be blocked. And so I decide, well, what should I do? Should I talk? Should I ask him? What should I say something? This is my lane, buddy. Maybe you didn't see my shirt. Instead, I get in the water and I swim a stroke, and then I get up to him and I stop for a moment. I'm about to say something, and he says, "How do you do that?" And I said, "What do you mean?" He says, "How do you, stroke and turn your head from side to side? Because I don't know how to swim, and I really wish I could do that." Of course, my whole attitude then changed. "Oh, I'll be happy to show you. Shall we share the lane? Maybe." But instead of giving him the benefit of the doubt at the beginning, I assumed that he was just my lane crasher who didn't respect my boundaries. So it just shows you you can go every day and realize you make assumptions and you have opportunities to be a little bit more a better person. So I hope next time I will do that.
Don't say anything.
Go ahead, Dave.
Don't say anything. Don't say anything.
Yeah, go ahead.
What really overlooked was he got to the lane, he looked down at the shirt, and he said, "Oh, some poor schmuck forgot his shirt."
Yeah, that could have been. That could have been.
Yeah.
They didn't take my shirt and throw it in the pool.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Now,
That is such a good example, Art. I mean, when I think what happens when you go to these resorts, do you know what people do? Yeah, they get up at 7 o'clock in the morning and they go and put their towels on the lounge chairs, on the choice lounge chairs, and when you come down at 10 or 11, I mean, there's no chair left to take, and people aren't on them.
Or you go to a concert, people take dibs on their
Well, saving seats, this is a problem.
Exactly.
Right. Is it respecting another person? So one of the things that is encouraged to try to cultivate this trait of a little more humility is to try to identify in everyone who we know something that we think they might be better in than we are.
okay.
Maybe they visit the sick more. Maybe they repeat less gossip. Maybe they are more of a peacemaker, or they're more grateful, or their ability to play the piano, or they're smarter, whatever. I mean, there could be a whole universe of things. And doing this would have several benefits. First of all, it helps remind us not to feel arrogant. And second, it helps us to avoid speaking ill of them, because when we think of them, we might be tempted to think of this quality or trait that is better than we are. I'm sorry, could you repeat that, Dave?
I was going to say along those lines, I'm a very gregarious person. I for a stranger. I spent all my career traveling, and so I was always around strange people, and I was always getting into conversations. And I don't think of one that I ever that had.
I'm sorry, we're not hearing you very well. I think there's some background noise here that's blocking you. Dave, could you say it again, please?
Okay. Along the lines of what Marilyn was saying, she felt, well, no, along these lines of what, looking at what somebody has to offer. I said I'm very gregarious. I never had known a stranger. I traveled all my life in my work. And so I was always getting into conversations with people. And I can't think of any of them that had nothing to offer. It seemed like on all levels, whether it be the guy that was shining your shoes or the waitress or some other executive, they all had something to offer that you went away with if you took the time to listen to them. And that's right along the line you're talking. You have to open up your ears to do that.
That's a great point. And I'll tell you that I've noticed in dealing with you, Dave, that you're very respectful of other people. I've noticed, so I appreciate that. So I certainly, when I think of you, Dave, I think if this is one of the qualities where you are definitely superior to me, and I'm trying to learn from you. So thank you.
Very kind of you. Thank you.
So let me just run through a couple, because we're kind of approaching the end here. Let's make some other quick suggestions for things that we might do to sort of cultivate additional humility, which again doesn't mean being a nobody, it just means being no more of a somebody than we should be. So we talked about waiting our turn, not assuming that other people's time is less valuable than ours, speaking gently to other people. This helps us when we do that to regard them as equals, not changing the subject to ourselves, not constantly talking about ourselves, giving credit to others when we have an idea. Don't assume that our view is the correct one. Respecting boundaries. That's something that I in the past have had difficulty with in different contexts. Giving other people the benefit of the doubt. Being hesitant to judge them. Inviting the advice of others and heeding the advice of people in positions of lesser authority or status. Acknowledging responsibility commensurate with resources. I mean, hypothetically, yes, I'm richer, smarter, whatever, have this education that other people don't. Well, but if that's true, then I need to go, with that needs to go my responsibility to give more tzedakah, try to teach more, try to use my skills in ways that benefit others. Not accepting exaggerated honors. Trying to ignore personal slights. Okay, so but that reminds me. We talked one more story about Moses. Okay, does anybody remember, and it's somewhat obscure, but this sentence what we read in Torah that said Moses was the most humble person on the face of the earth. Why did it say that? I mean, what was happening at that time, if you remember? So in that, what happened, this is chapter 12 of of Numbers. Miriam, his sister, started bad-mouthing him because he had married a Cushite woman. And she was angry because she felt that he was excessively arrogant and was a power grab over her and Aaron. She was basically saying, look, we were there when we crossed the Red Sea. We were in the tent when God was talking. Why does Moses think that he's the hot shot? God hears this and gets very angry, and imposes upon her scales of affliction. Then Moses, in response to that, ignores what she was doing, bad-mouthing him, and prays to God to heal her. And God then says, if you, exactly, something like, if you spit on your father, would you just, should there be no punishment? So God then does make her for 7 days experience this terrible skin affliction, and then she's healed. That's the answer, the end of the chapter. It's very short. The point being that Moses, rather than reacting negatively or angrily or harshly about the fact that his own sister is bad-mouthing him, he prays for her healing. And the rabbis say this is a wonderful example of how humble he was. He disregarded the personal slight, and he went to the more important issue. And so should we. Okay, some other quick things. Helping people less prominent or advantaged than we are. Trying to do, we've heard the expression, do random acts of kindness. Okay, so the same thing. Try to do nice things for people that they'll never find out about. That's a way to avoid the temptation to be arrogant. And then, again, with this golden rule, try to treat others the way we would want to be treated, which is not disrespectful, arrogant, cutting in line, assuming we know the right answer, all those sorts of things. Okay, so I think we can come to a conclusion on that, unless anybody would like to add anything.
We're going to have to go.
Okay.
We have a commitment. Next, can I just clarify for next week? Are we going to? Is it 4? Can we meeting at 4?
You know what? Let me send out an email to everybody and see whether we should revert to 1:30 or do it again at 4. I'm going to turn the tape off here, and Dave, you